quantitative distributions. Now, when we compare, so here the main idea here is that there's two ways that we can compare. All right. So we're still talking about SOX. Now, when we do SOX, we must use the same summary statistics appropriate in describing. And what that means, describing. Ugh, that just looks terrible. Describing. And what that means is that if either requires the 5-number summary, and can anybody in here, when is it required or when is it appropriate to use a 5-number summary to describe? So when is it pretty much required to describe using the 5-number summary? When describing, we're talking about describing. When do you use the 5-number summary in your descriptions?
Is it for quantitative data?
All the data is quantitative. So all the data is quantitative. So when describing quantitative data, now there's two ways you can do it. You can do the 5-number summary or the mean and standard deviation. So remember, the other one is the mean and standard deviation, when I'm going to get into that in just a little bit. So there's the 5-number summary / IQR. IQR is part of the 5-number summary calculations. So when do we use the 5-number summary?
Is it when they ask you to basically describe it? Like the what's going on in the problem?
When they ask you to describe, you can either do this 5-number summary / IQR or use the mean and standard deviation. So there's two options here. So when we do SOX, you might be doing this version or you might be doing this version. So when do you do one versus the other? When is it appropriate to use the 5-number summary as your description statistics? And when is it appropriate to use the mean and standard deviation as your descriptive statistics?
I think it's appropriate when they don't give you a graph, but they only give you like what's going on in the problem.
No, a little bit more. It doesn't matter if they give you the graph or not. Anybody else? Not a single person in here? When the data is skewed or outliers present. If there's outliers or if the data is skewed, the shape is skewed or there's outliers, the summary statistics that are appropriate would be the median in IQR. The mean and standard deviation, when both distributions are symmetrical with no outliers. That's a biggie, everybody. That's a really biggie. So if you didn't click on that one, if you didn't know what I was saying, if you didn't know the answer to that question for whatever the various reasons, that is a biggie in statistics, and it's a biggie for this entire unit on quantitative. When the data is skewed, we use the median and IQR to describe center and spread, because we're really focusing on the center and spread. And do you use these two or do you use these two? You do not use both, because if you use both, I grade the run. That's wrong. That's how it's graded. If you have what's called parallel answers, you tell me both the median and the mean. Well, you should have used the median, so I'm gonna have to grade you like you only asked and stated the mean. That's how it works. If it was vice versa, you use the median, or you stated out both of them, but you should have used the mean. If you write both of them, it is incorrect. Just you're trying to sell out, and this is what I'm an AP grader. I grade the AP statistics exam, and these are what we call students who just they're shooting themselves in their foot, and we're like, that's what we kind of call it. It's like, all right, don't say anything more. And this happens so much in AP statistics. We need to know when to stop. More is not better. So a lot of times I'll be like, ooh, perfect, beautiful. Wait a minute, there's more. Uh-oh. Uh-oh. Oh. And now they went from having a perfect score to having like a 1. From a 4, which is a perfect score on the problem, to like a 1. Because they try to I'm going to write about this, and I'm going to write about this, and I'm going to write about that. And I don't really understand what this means, but I'm going to talk about that anyway. And now they lost so much points. Where if they just had stopped after the first sentence or two, it would have had full credit. All right. So in statistics, we need to understand what we're talking about. We can't be, they'll say something and then they'll say like beautiful answer, and then a student will say it is, and they'll just say that word is. Oh, yeah, it's definitive. Now you're saying exactly, and we know a lot, very, very, very often it's not exact. Iffy statements. English grades. So, yeah.
Sorry.
Yeah,
What if the data is symmetrical but there's one outlier?
Then we still use the median and IQR.
Okay, thank you.
And if it's either, now, 90% of the time, we're using the median IQR. Very rarely will we use the median and standard deviation in comparing. It can happen, but it rarely happens, because typically one of the distributions is going to be most likely skewed. One of the distributions is most likely going to have an outlier. It happens more often than not. So 90% of the time when we are comparing. Now, it's important to note, one of the distributions could be symmetrical and the other is not. Well, it doesn't matter, because one of them was not. One of them was skewed because one of the distributions had an outlier. We must now still compare medians to medians and IQRs to IQRs. We no longer can use the mean and standard deviation, even though it might be appropriate for one of those distributions. Because we are comparing, we need to compare apples to apples. We can't go comparing medians to means. That is not. Biggest mistake people make, the biggest mistake AP students make, is they don't compare. Simply describing, stating, compare, center, and spread. Stating, center, and spread is not comparing. It happens all the time. Another one where I'm like, oh, just, yeah, I had to knock so many people off on the AP exam when I'm grading them. They'll say the median for, men is, 65 inches. And the median for women is 60 inches. Did I compare? No, there's nothing. You must have some type of linking verb required. You need to have some type of linking verb. Think verb. Verb is the right word. I'm pretty sure verb is the right word. I'm not an English guy. There's a linking word. Verb, yeah. So larger. Is that a verb?
No.
No. What is it? Adjective?
Yeah, yeah. Adjective.
Thank you. I'm learning something new right now. See, I try to get a little fancy. Linking adjective required. Larger, smaller, wider, bigger, lesser, less, more. You need a word that compares. It's usually as simple as that. Basically, what you're going to be doing is you're describing for two of them. You're going to describe, but you're going to link. You have to have that linking word. You just have to say those words. You can't just say you're going to talk about, you're going to do context. You're going to talk about the shape for both. You're going to talk about you're going to mention outliers. Note if high or low. And then you're going to go to center. And we must compare. And then we're going to go to spread. You must compare. Okay. So we're talking about the shape. You don't really have to. There's no really comparison. You don't say this one is more skewed. You don't have to say things like that. Okay. No things like more skewed. It's skewed. This distribution. The males' heights are skewed left. The women's heights are symmetrical, roughly symmetrical. That'd be good. That's it. So really, you're just stating shapes and stating outliers. But when you talk about outliers, you need to talk about if there was a high outlier or a low outlier. Don't just tell me there was an outlier, because the location of the outlier matters, high or low. And finally, when you compare, you compare. I am I feel that most all of you right here, this should be relatively straightforward. This is just this is very straightforward, based on prior. Okay, but the center and spread ones are a little bit more difficult. Now, you're going to get the summary statistics. So you might get the summary statistics. And for example, we're talking about male and female heights in AP stats. Okay. And then I tell you that the mean equals 62 inches. The standard deviation is 3 inches. I give you the min, Q1, the median, Q3, and the maximum. We'll go with 56. They're all inches. 60, 62, 65, 70. And this is for the females. And for the males, the summary statistics, the mean, standard deviation, the min, Q1, the median, Q3, and the maximum. Now, these problems I actually view as a little bit harder. These are the types of problems where you might. I think I push these mostly to tomorrow's homework so that you can practice today. Of course, because if you have like the parallel box plots, the parallel box plots are beautiful because you're given the min, the Q1, the median, Q3, and max, and you can visually see that comparison. So it might be helpful to draw. So although it is not always required, all right, unless stated, you do not need parallel box plots, but it is helpful. It helps you to see if there's potentially an outlier so that you can check for outliers as well. So let's say that the mean is 69 inches. Standard deviation is 2 inches. The min is 66, then 67 for the Q1, 68 for the median, 70 for Q3, and 74 for the max. Okay. Now, there's a lot to break down in this problem right now. Let's talk about shape. All right, let's talk about shape. From the summary statistics. So this is really what Anne's question was. This is what her question was. And this is the first part that I want to really answer. We want to talk about really how far apart the numbers are from the median here and from the median here. So if we notice over here, there is a +2 and then a +4. There's a 4 difference here and a 2 difference here. There's a 3 difference here and a 5 difference here. Okay. So females are what? What would you say the distribution looks like? Without now, this is if you're struggling with what I'm going to try to do right here, then what that really probably means is that you need to draw the parallel box plots. Okay. But I think you can kind of see here that Q3 is closer to the minimum, closer to the median than Q1. Or sorry, Q1 is closer.
So is it skewed right?
Yes. If you're having trouble understanding why she got skewed right, we're going to make parallel box plots right after this so you can see. So these values are further away. So these are closer to median up here on the top. All right. Let's look at the mins. This is a +1. This is +1. And this is where I'm looking at in terms of the center. This is +2, and this is another +4. So the males, so the female, sorry, heights. The male heights are what? Male heights are
They be skewed left.
they're still skewed right for the same reason. They're also skewed right for the same reason. The right numbers are further away. Now, like I said, if you're having trouble seeing that, then what we can do is to look at a parallel box plot. So I'll go with 56 I have to, and although it's not required, it might be something that is kind of required to you. Of course, some problems will say and require you to draw the parallel box plots, and that's usually a good thing. So we have heights in inches, and then for the minimums, I have, for females, I have 56, 60, 62, 65, 70, and if you look over here, these numbers are a little bit closer. This is a little, I hate when it does that. This side is a little bit closer than this side. Now, if I had to go back and I had to rethink about this, I would probably say I could probably add in the word, and it would probably be appropriate here. Slightly skewed to the right. It's not big, but the right sides, the median, the Q3 is further out to the right. The quartile is further out from the center on the right, and the maximum is further out than the minimum. So the numbers are really kind of being pushed out, so skewed right. But if I look at this, it's not a really biggie. I would probably go slightly skewed right. Okay. If somebody were to say roughly symmetrical, I think I could probably give them still full credit on this one because it's not really, really skewed. It's kind of slightly. That's just females. And then I do for males. The minimum was 66. Then 67, 68, 70, 74. You can see now in this, for the males is definitely skewed to the right. The box is much more furtherly to the right of the median, and the whisker on the right is much longer than the whisker on the left. So this definitely tells me that this is skewed right. Not slightly. The males are skewed to the right. Okay. Visual, how to do it by just looking at the summary statistics. Are there any outliers in this problem? You can pretty much almost like a ruler, right? I can tell from this picture that there's going to be no outliers. Now, if you don't agree with me, you can check the work, but these whiskers are not really that long in comparison to the box. It's definitely not 1.5 boxes if you draw your box plot appropriately. Now, on the AP exam, they're typically, what they're going to do on the AP exam is they're going to give you the parallel box plots. All right, they would give them to you so that you can see if there was outliers or not. So if the problem, it would specifically say to find outliers, or will specifically say to check for outliers, show work if I'm requiring it. But that really makes the problem a lot longer. But there's no outliers. Now, center, remember, is the word for typical. So when talking about a typical, and one of your questions asks, which one is typically or on average bigger? Okay. What summary statistic are we going to use for the center?
The males?
That's no summary statistic. You're giving. I know you were answering the question I had. You were answering the question I had asked about which one is typically bigger. But before we get there, which summary statistic are we going to use?
Median and IQR.
Well, just for center. Median.
Oh, yeah, sorry.
The median is what a typical on average. All right. So some questions will just simply ask you, now instead of comparing, which one is typically bigger? You don't look at everything. You're just going to compare medians. Which one has a bigger median? So when we talk about the typical, we're focused on the medians. So which one has a bigger median?
Males.
Now, I want you to notice something. What didn't I do? What didn't I do that you would typically do in the describing part? What did I not? That's the answer. That's the answer for comparing center. Males have a higher median height. Done.
You didn't find the median or state the median?
Correct. There is no need to state medians. Must just compare. That's why we don't give you credit. If you just say the median, the female median height was 62 inches and the male median height was 67 inches. Well, that's no credit for comparing because you didn't tell me which number was bigger. Do you know that 60, that in terms, because when some units, the bigger you go, it actually means worse, right? You can, there are certain situations where we're talking about like how many seconds, how fast can you run a distance, right? How fast can you run, um, 100 meters? And if these were seconds and stuff like that, which, slower. So we need like that context right there. So you do not need to state them. When we grade this on the AP exam, if you state a number that's wrong, we take off credit. So if you for some reason state some other number, we mark that down. You just have to compare. Now you might see in my solutions, you might see me state both of them and then say which one is bigger. That is good because I state them correctly. But if I state them wrong and then compare them correctly, I can still get points taken off. If it's obvious that it was a boo-boo, we call it an uh-oh. In AP Stats are, we call it transcription errors. If we can tell it you were transcribing a number from your problem to your solutions. If we can tell it was just that, then we're okay with it. We'll say, you know what, it's reasonable to believe that the student knew exactly what they were talking about. They just wrote down the wrong number. Spread. Now, I also, something to note, you can also, and you might see me do this, you can also compare the min to the min. The max, the Q1 to the Q1. Not so on typically who's bigger, who's taller, males. Why? Because the median is higher, and that's good enough for us in statistics. All right, the males have a higher height. That is good enough for us on the AP Statistics exam in our course to get full credit. If you want to go further, though, you can say, not only do the males have a higher median, the males have a higher minimum. The males have a higher Q1, the males have a higher Q3, the males have a higher maximum. That's just like shoving home the point, but not really needed. I want to point out this, and this is for your homework. I'm going to erase it right after I draw this, okay? Let's say that we had one female that was in the class, and she was 78 inches tall. So she's an outlier over here, okay? Who is typically taller, males or females?
Still the males because the outliers shouldn't depict your answer.
Correct. So what would I write for my answer? So yes, and state how they get full credit. It's right there. It's the boxed answer.
Wait, what do you mean yes, what?
So yes, but explain why the males. So yes, the answer is still the males. So answer, the answer would be males because
their median is still higher, their max is still higher, their Q1 is still higher.
Well, yeah, don't go into that because the max was not still higher with this data point. See, that's where you start going into it, and without even realizing it, you shoot yourself in the foot. So you got to be careful. So literally, just stick to the median. The males are typically taller because their median is higher. Done. I don't care if there's an outlier. Now, if the question said, who has the tallest person? Now you can say females. The females have the tallest person. Okay. Now, if I said, who has a larger range? Who has the larger, with this outlier? Actually, you don't even, so let me get rid of that. So who has a larger, now, or I'm going to keep this outlier in here for another reason. Okay, so who has a larger range? With the outlier being there. Who has a larger range? Max minus the minimum is range. So who has a larger range?
Females.
Females. What happens if I got rid of this outlier? Who has the largest range?
Females.
Still females. My point that I want to make is that if there are outliers, they still count for the data. It's still the maximum or the minimum. So if a question asks you to find the range for a problem tonight, you do use the outliers. Who has a larger spread? Who has a larger spread? What do we use for spread? We use the IQR. Often okay for range as well if no outliers. Basically what I'm saying is that on that little part that I wrote on top is sometimes like when we're looking for spread, we'll give you full credit for stating the IQR or the range. But here's the thing. If I'm always going to give you credit for IQR, don't go into the range. Just talk about IQR. So in this case, who has the higher spread?
Females.
Females have a larger IQR. Once again, I didn't state the IQR. I just said that they have a higher IQR. And remember, visually, the IQR is from the box. However, if I was doing the 5-number summary, I might go back over to here and I might find the IQR and say, oh, the IQR here is 5. And over here, the IQR is 2. Oh, 3, sorry, 3. Q1 and Q3. Q1 and Q3 to get to the IQR. So I can literally see that the IQR for females is 5 and the IQR for males is 3. So while the males are typically taller, the females' heights are much more spread out. Let me double check. I also just wanted to note something real quick. Smaller spread is equivalent to saying more consistent. You might see this word, which one is more consistent? It's the one with a smaller spread, the one with the smaller IQR or smaller range if it's applicable. So when we talk about consistency, spread is a measure of consistency. So if you're talking when you're trying to compare, because you're going to be trying to do content like who would you rather choose, you might want to choose the more consistent person. But because you might have that player who that scores a lot of points, but they're all over the place. Sometimes they can show up and they don't score any points. Sometimes they go off and just score a ridiculous amount of points. Maybe that's who you want on your team because you want that big number. Or maybe you want that person that, they may not ever score as many points as that one person is going to score, but this person's more consistent. I know what I'm going to get from that person, and that might be more valuable to you. So there's questions on your homework that are kind of like more than one answer. Tomorrow, you're going to be actually making today's, basically you're given all of the graphs that you're trying to do. Be careful with the words. Sometimes they use the word all. Is all of these greater? Are all of these or versus typically. So that typically is median, all is all. There is no, and outliers count as data points. Tomorrow you have a problem, I believe, where you have to use the data. So I give you all of the data, and you're going to have to you're going to basically want to input those numbers into your calculator and find the 5-number summary to make your parallel box plots. So you have to find the 5-number summary in order to do that for those problems. That's what I have for you today. Your homework is posted inside Google Classroom. And get your homework done. I will see you tomorrow, and check if you're checking in. If not, come to office hours. I'll see you tomorrow. If not, I'll see you Wednesday. Take care, everybody.